Welcome to HeartWired, Emotionally Intelligent Leadership for an AI World, the podcast where technology meets humanity. I'm Dr. MJ, your host. Today's guest, Mehek Mohan, is the co-founder of Kahani, a personalized gamified recovery platform for people who have eating disorders. And it's really based on evidence-based therapy and AI. A Stanford MBA graduate with a background in molecular biology from Berkeley. Well, that's impressive. And experience leading AI initiatives from pharma. Mehek is now her co-founder of building Kahani to provide people with continuous personalized support when they need it the most. Mehek, I am so excited to have you here. You have such a fascinating background: molecular biology, project manager, using AI initiatives, Stanford Business School graduate, and now you're finding your own AI healthcare company. What a journey. So take us back to the beginning. What drew you into this kind of intersection of science and technology, AI and healthcare?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be on this podcast with you, talking about my favorite things on technology and health and the intersection to really think about how we can increase access to care. To answer your question, when I was younger, probably in third, fourth, fifth grade, I mean, at one point I wanted to be an archaeologist, but after that, I really got into the field of science, thinking about what my grandfather did. He was the youngest neurosurgeon in India. He was the neurosurgeon for the Shah of Iran during that time of the world. And so I got to see what it looked like to be at the cutting edge of science. He unfortunately passed away. With a condition that he did diagnose himself. However, technology wasn't ready at the time to be able to help him for what he needed. And so that really stuck with me. And as I went to high school, I thought about how important it is to really be able to understand who we are as people, in the context of our own bodies. And I think as a woman, when I was going through my own changes and hormones and all of that, I was always confused about what was happening. And every answer I got from doctors was, don't worry, you're within range. And that never meant anything to me. I never knew what that meant. What was this range that we were talking about? Is it all of humankind? Every single woman who's ever walked planet Earth? That doesn't help me. I want to be compared to me. Am I within range from what I was in a similar situation a year ago, a month ago, a week ago? I want to know those things. And so personalized healthcare has always been so interesting to me. And I was very privileged to then go to UC Berkeley, be able to study under Nobel laureate Dr. Jennifer Doudna, who was right before she won the Nobel on gene editing. And it was the most electric time to be in that lab as companies were spinning out of her lab. And I got to work under researchers who really were passionate about understanding the human DNA and biology and understanding how we work the way that we work and to make things better, to figure out how to cure diseases in new ways. And so then from there, I decided, well, can I apply this maybe at scale? And so I was again very lucky to go to Genentech, an incredible pharmaceutical company that really puts a lot of emphasis on early clinical research and leveraging technology to better understand our patients, our molecules, our drugs, and be able to deliver them at the right time for the right person. And I was there again at a time right when the leadership had changed, and this amazing woman named Dr. Aviv Regev was coming on board, and she really pioneered bringing AI full force into the space. And that was something that gave me perspective on, wow, this is just a little bit of how we can use what was before the ChatGPT world of more democratized AI, but some of the early inklings of, and when I say early, it's actually quite late in the context of AI development, but early in pharma applying some of these technologies to really make our clinical trials better for patients. And so that gave me great insight. And finally, after a 5 years there, I decided I'm going to go to business school and take some time to marinate and all of these learnings and think about how I can now use all of the skills I've learned to make an impact in a space I really care about. And that's something that I'm very, again, privileged to be working with. I think the theme here is I've been very privileged to work with incredible people throughout the phases of life, and now I get to share this part of my journey with my co-founder, who's one of my best friends, and an incredible technical talent who is working with me to really build what we view as an entirely new reality for access to mental health care, starting with eating disorders.
Oh, that's amazing. And I love the passion that I heard in your voice. And when you're talking about the work that you're doing, the people that you're helping. And, I think about, of course, my emotional intelligence brain goes in, your whole self awareness. And I think what you're saying is that you really went deep within yourself to really understand, like your background, who you are, where you want to be in the world, and kept that will keep you committed for the long haul. So, you mentioned that you and your co-founder both had loved ones who struggled with eating disorders.
Yeah.
And I understand your deep passion personally. So, can you walk us through how those experiences shaped your vision for what the technology can do differently in this space? And what gaps did you see?
Yes. Oh my gosh, this question really fires me up because as much as I love the how far we've come in healthcare, I see how long and bumpy and gravelly the road is ahead to be able to get to a place where people can really be met in the times that they need it, in the ways that they need it the most. And so you're totally right. My co-founder and I both had separate experiences, and a couple of shared ones too, actually, with people we love in our lives who um, were struggling with this with this illness. And eating disorders are very secretive. They thrive in isolation. It's actually very hard to catch until it starts to get pretty bad in many cases. And so for just speaking on my experience, I mean, supporting two people who I love in my life, um, it was very scary, very painful. And I talked a little bit about this actually during my time at Stanford because um, it's really important to understand what the signs are when someone you love is struggling and could potentially be going down a path where the eating disorder starts to consume a lot more of their day to day and their headspace, their mind space, and so much of their contextual experience. So once I started noticing a couple of these signs in the people I loved, I didn't know what to do. I was 20 something and very unclear about what the language was like to confront someone you love with something that you're worried about because you're worried about so many other things. And from a selfish context, you're like, what if this ruins this relationship? What if it's something that could push them further away? What if I'm wrong? What if this offends that person? So there are so many what ifs that I think are barriers to having people show up for the ones that they love. But then you educate yourself a little bit. You spend hours and hours on Reddit and the National Eating Disorder Association website and every other resource you can find. And you learn that eating disorders are, in fact, the second most deadly psychiatric disease. And that should be reason enough to figure out that you have to say something to the people you love because most of the time, those people need to know that the people they love see them, know them, and will be there with them. And so that's something that was an interesting and quite frankly still a process that I'm learning of what are the right things to say because so many times we might have intent but the impact is quite different. And that's because, the eating disorder can warp the way some things come out in people, in your brain. And that's something that I also really feel passionate about is educating people to destigmatize all of these elements that are wrappers around what an eating disorder can do to someone's life. So, tactically answering your question, access to care is fragmented. We know this. Supply and demand in terms of clinicians available versus the people who need it. The gap is just widening and will continue to widen. There are rurally dense areas where people never receive access to care. And then tack on just the waiting time and the cost to then the personalization. I mean, we so many times joke about finding a therapist and it's like dating, right? You have to find the right fit that's hard when also the supply isn't so high and it's constrained by your geographic region, your insurance, your family context, your socioeconomic status, and your cultural background, to name just a few of the factors.
Mm.
So, putting that all together, we thought this is the perfect storm for technology to be applied in a way that has never been applied before. And we've never been in a context where society might actually be open minded enough to try something like this in a new context. So we saw ChatGPT's number one use case was as a therapist or for therapy related purposes in 2025. Granted, I think there are lots of issues with that, and there should be lots of safeguards and guardrails put in place to make sure that people are actually receiving effective care. Which is why what we wanted to build was something in partnership with clinical psychologists at Stanford, and other therapists and clinical advisors who've helped along the way to make sure that what we're offering is rooted in some type of evidence-based therapy, be it CBT, DBT, ACT, and also relevant to an individual's external context. So, doing a worksheet activity in a vacuum, you're not going to get better that way. You're going to get better when you realize I have to grocery shop tomorrow and I know that that's a trigger for me. I probably won't do it. That's going to ruin the rest of my week. I'm already stressed about this. I'm going to do nothing. No, this is where we can get in and say, well, let's help circuit break some of these sticky thoughts. Let's help use these frameworks so that you can achieve goals in the real world, just practiced in the context of a reflection in an app. So that's kind of what we're going for at this point.
Yeah, and yeah, that's so I know people who have had, eating disorders, and it's really painful to watch. It really is. So I can understand that, but I really see that you are able to kind of look over and have that social awareness to really start reading what people need, even though it doesn't exist right now,
Mhm.
and have that empathy and the understanding of how to really start working and having those needs met. That really shows that, that's emotional intelligence in action for me anyway. So, being something tied building something that's tied to loved ones, um, how does that work with you? How do you manage your stress? How do you manage your emotional intensity of this work and staying focused because you are a leader in this organization? So, how do you do that?
That's such a good question. I'm laughing because there is the question you asked, and then there's kind of the meta layer of just being a founder in an early stage company where you're trying to build something that's never existed before. And those emotional waves of, we can do this, we're going to conquer the world, to I have no idea what I'm doing and this is never going to work. The waves are, I think ever present. And it is a really good thing to be able to manage the amplitude of those waves a little bit. I think at the beginning part of the process, those waves were a lot bigger. But now, it's easier to sort of normalize, like, yeah, there might be some doubt or confusion, but there's always a way out. And we have to create better frameworks in our own minds to be able to think about how do we either compartmentalize at this point in time and then revisit, because I think compartmentalizing without revisiting is just a recipe for disaster if it keeps building up. So finding out ways to carve out 5 or 10 minutes here. And I think that's kind of the point of what we're trying to do with Kahani is how can you carve out 5 to 15 minutes ish in your day for yourself to practice baby steps. And that's really the goal. Is we know most people don't have 3 hours every day to commit to becoming the best version of themselves, and that means a 7-step night skincare routine and a 15-step workout routine, whatever that is. It can be a lot. And so if we can break it down into micro steps, I think it becomes a lot more manageable and important to see and visualize your own progress. To answer your question on loved ones, I mean, not only is this work so meaningful, but every single day I get to interact with a new person who I do at this point a 90-minute onboarding session with to understand what their drivers are, what their lived experiences. And in many cases, there's a lot of trauma associated with where this person has come from and where they want to go. And it is not only one of the greatest privileges to be able to hold space for an individual story, but it is also incredibly eye opening for me because every single day I get to interact with walks of life that sure, as you grow up, you travel, you read books, you talk to different people, but how often do you get 90 minutes to just let someone open up to you in a pretty structured way around how they view themselves, what their biggest motivators and life goals are, what holds them back. And it gives you this what I imagine to be quite a clear picture of how you can then effectively support someone you love. And that is something that I find so meaningful. It's also something that takes a lot of emotional energy because it's something that you're so focused in on for 90 minutes to make sure you're catching not only what they say, but what they're not saying. And then you're picking out these little threads that you can then tie back in later and bring up in different parts of the conversation. And all of that is, it feels like a beautiful orchestra, but it can get exhausting. And so that is something that I'm hopeful for is sure, humans get tired, but what if we could do this in a way that is so deeply personalized and empathetic and in a way where technology never gets tired, technology never has to sleep. It's 24/7. You always can hold the same excellent space for someone without your needs ever having to be an issue. Right now, we're not there yet. And so right now there is a matter of, okay, well, now I'm going to take a walk for 10 to 15 minutes, clear my head, breathe some fresh air in, and then come back and create those little micro buffers in between. But that's an interesting world that I envision that could possibly help with periods of extra bandwidth that you might need from your community that maybe your community isn't able to give.
Yeah. So, I know that, you did launch your
Yes.
program, Kahani, and it offers continuous care, as you mentioned, 24/7, and you said a circuit breaker for triggers so that it really helps people right at that moment when they're feeling that trigger,
Yeah.
which is incredible because you don't usually have a counselor or a clinician coming right at the time that it's happening. But when we were talking earlier, you did mention there's no replacement for human connection, especially when you're talking about mental health concerns.
Mhm.
How do you balance the AI capabilities and preserve that essential human element in this eating disorder recovery process?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think the way we've defined ourselves from the beginning is not a replacement for medical treatment. We've always considered ourselves adjunctive, but what does that really mean when you are, practicing some of these similar skills in an app? The context a lot at conferences right now is, is AI going to replace therapists? And we're like, no, I don't think that's the right question to be asking. I think the right question to be asking is, are you able to use technology so that you can interact in your real world better? And so if that can be with a therapist for 1 hour a week, and it can also be in 5-minute increments at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep and you know that those same thought patterns are happening again. Probably no one around is awake to call. So, what can we do now to help you go to sleep? And then you'll have a better day the next day. Or to the grocery shopping example, for instance, it's a Sunday at 2 p.m. and you know you have this task ahead of you. How can we help you accomplish your real world goals or strengthen your real world relationships using AI to help practice those skills in reflection, but not as a replacement for action? So, I think we've heard, some horror stories in, the New York Times and other news articles on AI psychosis and people spending, hours and hours and hours on ChatGPT or whatever their LLM of choice is. But what we're trying to measure in terms of what real progress looks like is you're gonna have that trigger again. So, did it last a little bit? Was it a little bit shorter this time? Was it a little bit less intense this time? Did you reach out to one more person this time that maybe you didn't last time? Those are signs of progress, and that's how we actually measure effective usage of technology as it applies to your actual lived experience.
Yeah, wow. So, you're building you've built this AI, application, and it's for one of the most vulnerable populations,
Yeah.
people with eating disorders. And their stakes are pretty high with this. How do you approach that ethical responsibility in this work? And what principles guide your decision making when AI recommendations should impact somebody's health?
Yeah, so we have taken a few kind of non-negotiable frameworks that we use when we think about developing this kind of tech. At the outset, it's super important to accurately state what we are versus what we're not. And so that is a very clear, a disclaimer, privacy policy, terms and conditions that really share what we are, what we do, and what we aren't a replacement for. On the other hand, though, there are model specific questions on which types of models we use and how we build in guardrails. And there are interesting ways that we can leverage technology to be able to steer very clear of certain topics. For instance, if self harm gets mentioned, how do we flag resources immediately? Stop
Mhm.
the conversation, direct a user to the 988 crisis line or the NEDA hotline, for instance. These types of resources can and should be available immediately when we see any signs of that. Then the other piece is on how do we think about the population we're serving? Right now, since we're super early, our inclination is that from what we're seeing, most users are in a place in their recovery where they're relatively motivated and are certainly not in a level of crisis. We've been very clear that if there are, physiological, for instance, like weight restoration or any sort of lab or vital related work that might be unstable, this is probably not a tool that one, you're going to be interested in using, and two, would probably provide any sort of value given the order of operations of what you probably need in that moment. And so we've been sort of targeting more individuals who are thinking about augmenting where they are in recovery and working towards that piece of, maintenance down the road where, food noise and the eating disorder voice just becomes a lot quieter in day to day interactions. So we take this very seriously and we think about it in a number of contexts because you're right, it is a very vulnerable population. But as a result, there has been so much fear about building anything in this space and so I think that out of self-preservation, maybe many companies have decided, okay, well, we'll focus on, less severe conditions and broadly market as greater mental health. My co-founder and I care deeply about this population. We also believe that what we're doing, if we can translate this to a more vulnerable and also a population that just hasn't gotten a lot of investment dollars even put into it for a new tech to be applied, then maybe we can then abstract that out to other conditions as well. But I do think taking an approach of transparency of where we are, and then also using guardrails so that we use more conservative parts of the models so that we're not engaging in any sort of unhelpful advice. And finally, just in the way that we integrate evidence based therapies, is that we are at no point giving advice. We use the Socratic questioning method. And so that is much more, introspective, having a user investigate their own potentially self limiting beliefs or harmful coping mechanisms. We are never telling you, like, this should be your meal plan and this is what you should eat or how much exercise you should do. Like, that is completely out of our purview, interest, or jurisdiction. And so we sort of separate what we can and should not do.
Yeah, so that's that, and so the human touch comes in, also to that. And I'm really happy to hear how you have these guardrails, and also that if there is, some self-harm, that there are guardrails there to help as well. So, you just launched. So tell us a little bit about what's a little more than a month, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So tell
We
us
are
a little bit about that.
Yes, thank you for asking. This is
Mhm.
so exciting. We went through so many iterations last year. We're at a place now where we're so excited to have officially launched on the App Store and Play Store as Kahani Health. So you can look it up if you're interested. What we have right now is the more self service version of the app. So what you'll see is much more of a self guided journey into your North Star and your values and different progress areas what we're offering right now, which we think will be a much more interesting and probably useful way to use this app, is we are actually doing at this point personalized onboarding sessions. And what that looks like is what I had mentioned before of this really beautiful, deep analysis of an individual. We do a 90-minute deep dive into who they are and where they want to go. And then what we do is we translate that into insights and into a recovery analysis of what your profile looks like and a 4-week plan that is very, very, 5-minute long tasks, very deeply personalized to what matters to you, and different areas that we can help you make progress in different parts of your life that are deeply important to you. That version of the app is separate because we'll have it be integrated with your plan, and so it's a lot more of, to your point, the human touch that gets integrated and making sure that we really deeply can create an effective 4-week plan. And ideally, it adapts every single month because people grow and they change. So that is sort of the idea right now. If people are interested, they can reach me directly. I'm sure you can link my email in the in the show notes, but also on our website if you wanted to sign up. We can do these specialized onboarding sessions to create a personalized plan for you.
Yeah. So, just one last question quickly.
Mm.
Now, there might be people who are listening right now who are founders or of startups or leaders thinking about bringing AI into healthcare, especially in the mental health arena. Is there one piece of advice that you would give them about doing it responsibly and effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, to your point on having a human in the loop, it's really important to have some sort of oversight just so that we can cross check what is being outputted. Maybe not every single response, but just a sampling of them so that we can start to get a feel for if this is directionally accurate. And that's something that keeping, the human touch, some people call it, right, the spidey senses. It's not about what's in the books. Obviously AI can do that probably better than a human at this point because there are just so many. There's no memory issue at that point. But there is that level of spidey sense of would this feel right for that person? And sometimes you just kind of know that in your gut. And so it's helpful to sort of have a little bit more of that oversight. And I think that's really important, at least in this current stage of where we're at with AI.
Mahek, you are doing incredible work. And I really appreciate what you're doing for people right now. And also having you here and talking about using your emotional intelligence in the AI world. You have built a cutting edge technology, and you're
Mm.
doing it with deep empathy, with ethical responsibility, and being fully self aware, the spidey feelings of what really matters and the commitment of preserving human connection at the center of it. So, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. And I wish you the best of luck in your new endeavor.
Thank you so much. This has been such a joy. I loved speaking with you, and truly it brings me so much joy to be able to share what we're doing. So, if there is anyone who knows someone or is in need of support, we would love nothing more than to help.
Thank you.